This is Martin Peterson from CommonEdge.org, and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. Joining us today is art and architecture collector Robert Rubin. No, not the guy who was Secretary of the Treasury under Bill Clinton, although people do get them confused. Later we'll hear some great jazz with Libby York. And now, your host, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Thanks, Tom. Like playing putt-putt and going for frozen yogurt, escape rooms are on that list of things people do occasionally with, say, 4 to 6 friends. The premise is this. You're put in a room and you have an hour to solve a series of elaborate puzzles, usually boxes or doors, locks with keys or combinations. If you don't finish in an hour, you lose.
But they do let you out, right?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Inside the box or behind a door is another puzzle, and the most fancy-pants rooms have secret rooms or even secret levels you can reach if you work well as a team. The first modern escape room was built in Kyoto, Japan in 2007, and quickly they expanded to Europe, then to the U.S. I did my first one in Poland, and that was maybe 30 rooms ago. If this sounds incredibly boring, that's okay. You are clearly not nerdy enough.
Says you.
One of the things I love about my escape room team, yes, there is such a thing, is how well we spot clues around the room and put them together to create the answer to a puzzle. For example, there's a metal plate about 4 by 4 inches, about waist height on the wall on one side of the room. 10 feet away, on the other side of the room, there's another metal plate, same size, about waist height. Anyone remember the 60s song, I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing?
Mm-hmm.
It had its last heyday on the closing episode of Mad Men, where our hero Don Draper gets inspired to make Coke's new theme song at an Esalen-type personal development retreat. Anyway, over the fireplace in this escape room is a photo of guys from that era with long hair and girls in tie-dye and colored glasses, all holding hands. What does this clue tell us? Escape room enthusiasts might say, and they would be right, that your team should join hands and touch both metal plates. You do, and suddenly the fireplace swings open, revealing a secret room where the adventure continues. Our mission at U.S. Modernist is much like playing in an escape room every day. Our team of archivists and researchers, some of whom have found thousands of modernist houses, take disparate clues from architect archives, for sale listings, and even field trips to storage units to solve the mysteries of where the modernist houses are. It's an incredibly fun task and highly addictive. And apparently, at least for me, there's no cure. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Robert Rubin is a collector. From comic books to contemporary art, this former commodities trader has become an expert on architecture, with a degree in architectural history from Columbia. He spent the past 2 decades collecting art and architecture, curating exhibitions, writing about art and artists, and fixing up the Maison de Verre in Paris by Pierre Chareau, which he owns. He has also owned buildings by Jean Prouvé and Buckminster Fuller, both of which he repaired and then donated. He most recently curated an exhibition on the work of artist Richard Prince. Robert is also the founding principal of The Bridge, a golf club in the Hamptons that used to be a race course and now has one of the most modernist clubhouses designed by Roger Ferris. And it's filled with contemporary art by some of the most exciting new artists in the world. Robert Rubin speaks on art and architecture around the country, including the famous Crystal Bridges Museum in Bentonville, Arkansas, where we spoke with curator Dylan Turk a few months back. Here's George's conversation with Robert Rubin, recorded at his kitchen table in New York City.
All the articles I read about you, Bob, are about collections of things. Like you collected baseball cards and you collected stamps, which means I have to ask you, did you ever get the upside down Curtis Jenny?
No. I mean, I wasn't that guy. I was a kid. But I had an English teacher in the 7th grade, Mr. Sheasley, who for some reason specialized in Belgian Congo stamps. So that was my, it was kind of Heart of Darkness before I knew what Heart of Darkness was, No, stamps are great,
Yeah.
FDR was a great stamp collector. He's one of my heroes. Baseball cards, coins, furniture, automobiles, houses. I don't really collect houses. I'm more of a serial occupier of houses.
Yeah, but you've caused some great things to be built.
Yes, that's true. But, I'm a dangerous client because I'm not an architect. I'm a law school dropout, so that makes me a very dangerous client to my lawyers. But I'm also a non-practicing all but dissertation for a PhD in theory and history of architecture. So I can be a complete pain in the ass to the architects that work for me. But I can't do it,
Right.
I can't draw you a house. I can just kibitz your house, right?
I'm not an architect either, so I'm
right.
the same pain in the ass for people.
Right.
Now, you went to Exeter, if I follow this right, and graduated young at 15. And then did you go from there to Yale?
I went to France for a year, which was as almost as transformative an experience as going to Yale. I lived with a family in Brittany and went to French-speaking school for a year and was introduced to French culture in all of its aspects. They used to reimburse you your movie tickets if you saw French movies in their original version. So I remember seeing like Jean-Pierre Melville's Army of Shadows when it came out. And I was an avid moviegoer because it was free.
And what year was this about?
This was from the fall of 1969 until the spring of 1970. So I just missed 68. I just missed all the action, the student revolutions, which were a much bigger deal there than here.
And then Yale,
Then I went to
undergraduate.
Yale. Then I went to Yale. I studied literature. I went to a lot of movies. I was a director of the Film Society. And when I graduated, I became a newspaper reporter, but that didn't really lead me.
What was your beat?
I did the, spot news, and every night I had to go to either a board of education or a zoning board or a planning board or a town board.
This was in New Jersey,
This was
right?
in Red Bank, New Jersey, yes. And covered spot news during the day. And if I was good, they let me write some movie reviews or some culture pieces. But I was not cut out to be a newspaper reporter because I'm not really aggressive enough. You're supposed to be able to go up to somebody while his house is burning down and say, "How do you feel about your house burning down?" And I thought that was kind of intrusive, I graduated from college around the time of Watergate, and so it was seemed like a glamorous profession. And I wanted to be a writer, but nobody would buy my stuff. So I went to work in the research department of a commodity trading company.
Now, what is that? Wasn't law school in here somewhere?
I went to law school at night for a
Okay.
year, and I liked it. But I met a guy in law school who was working for this commodity trading firm, and he needed some help writing, and that led to an offer to work in the research department. I didn't really have any formal training in economics or commodities in particular, but as the head of the research department said, what counts is your ability to weave an interesting story. So that I could do. Eventually, I migrated toward all the yelling and screaming in the trading room and was there for the commodity boom of the 70s and early 80s. So I spent 25 years doing that.
Yeah, most people don't know much about commodities except from like the Eddie Murphy movie, Trading Places.
Yeah, okay. There's something there. That movie is realistic in certain ways. It's a market like the stock market or any other markets. It was less regulated back then. And, it goes up, it goes down. There are reasons that it goes up and it goes down. And people consume commodities, just like the stock market consumes capital. The people who buy commodities use it in manufacturing processes and whatever. And it all seems very far away now, although, I learned many hard lessons, things like you can't always leave by the same door that you entered through. That's one. That's a big one. And look, the financial markets, they're very interesting when you're making money, and they're terrible when you're losing money.
Right.
So I would
Sure.
say
Sure.
That is not as intellectually interesting as some other things.
Now, you had an interest in car racing all along, but
Right.
when did you think about buying the property out on Long Island, buying the race course? What year was that?
Well, that was 1981, and I had just bought my first real car.
You got to be, what, 26?
81, I was 28,
28.
27, 28. I cashed my first real bonus check on Wall Street and bought a Ferrari back when they were exotic.
Every
beast.
dentist didn't have one.
Every dentist didn't have one. And I heard about this Ferrari club at the bridge, and I went there, and they said, oh, my goodness, we're about to close because, we're underwater financially, and the shareholders want to build a subdivision, and my white knight tendencies kicked in. And I'm like, I got this car, and there's this track that's 10 minutes from my house, and they're going to close it? No way, right? So I got involved, and if I pursue what I love or what I'm interested in, it always works out. I mean, I remember also I bought this Ferrari GTO for over $1 million in 1987, and everybody said that I was completely nuts to pay that much, and it was over the top and whatever. And then 3 years later, I got divorced, and I sold the car for like 10 times what I had paid for it, and it killed me to do it. It was just a very grown-up thing to do, rather than turn my whole life upside down to find the money to settle my divorce. I could just kiss this car goodbye and say, okay, I had a nice time. And, so that's one example. The track is another example because I thought I was doing something pretty reckless. I mean, just consider the liability issues of owning a racetrack, right? And when I said to myself, well, if the racetrack doesn't work out, you can always develop it. But what the hell did I know about developing? And also development in the Hamptons is like a contact sport.
Sure.
I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't believe that I had an exit strategy. But, I was young, and it was a time when I was doing very well. And I thought that, money was an unlimited commodity, and that if I ran out, I'd make more.
Well, how did that work? I mean, had you done so well off of commodities that you could just even think about buying a race course?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that expensive.
Really?
It wasn't that expensive. I mean, it was a lot of money by reasonable standards, but it was. I was doing well. And there's such a thing called leverage, and I took a big risk. It turned out okay.
Yeah.
I could have also gotten completely hammered by that, but I didn't. I was lucky. There have been other things I've done that I haven't been so lucky, but that's okay.
I went back and looked at some of the early press about the race course, and there were some funny things that struck me. Like one was, it was written there was some sort of weird alliance between environmentalists who didn't want the land disturbed and race car enthusiasts who didn't want the race course to go away.
Yeah, I mean, it was, politics makes strange bedfellows. It was the largest undeveloped piece of property in the Hamptons at the time, and the environmentalists didn't want it developed. The racers didn't want the track to close, but they thought, well, a racetrack is less environmentally intrusive than 110 homes, which is true if you're measuring the impact on the water supply, because the track sits on the aquifer, the sole source aquifer. And so if you put 110 homes there with all the sewage that generates, it's not good for the aquifer, right? But if you just have a racetrack and, there's not a lot of stuff leaching into the ground from racing, although there's some. I mean, what's interesting from a land use standpoint is that back then, the town didn't have the means to buy the property. But subsequent to my acquisition of the property, they instituted what they call the Community Preservation Fund, which is a 2% tax on the sale of all property, including residences, which, of course, the construction industry said was the beginning of the end, and the sky was going to fall in and it was going to come in. Of course, what's happened now is that the towns have tens of millions of dollars to buy interesting parcels of land, which is a good thing because, I mean, there's an argument to be made that it just drives up the price of the land that they don't buy, which is true, but it's also allowed them to preserve some very significant parcels that would otherwise have been developed. And there's no doubt that if this were happening today, this parcel would be the first thing they would buy.
Sure.
Or they would have bought it in 1993 when it was auctioned, when I caused it to be auctioned so I could buy the part that I didn't already own. And it's very interesting to think about that. You know, I mean, I'm glad that I was able to buy it, but today I wouldn't be able to, you know, there is no comparable property for sale that could be developed, you know.
Well, why would the preservationists be against a golf course? You'd think that would be the
Well,
most beautiful
they're
thing.
not now. I mean, I think that what's also interesting is that at the time, what was then called the Group for the South Fork, which is now called the Group for the East End, was an adversary. And I like to think that I learned from their comments and I scaled back the project and I implemented various measures that are protective of the groundwater in terms of testing and chemical applications and stuff like that. And now the Group for the East End is an ally of mine. In fact, I was the honoree at their 50th anniversary
Nice.
dinner, and their executive director is a friend of mine because we are allies against a common enemy, which is a sandpit next door, which is digging to China and causing all sorts of problems, but, you know, operating under a pre-existing non-conforming use, and we're, you know, trying to shut them down.
Yeah.
So we're allies. But no, a golf course, if it's run properly, I mean, I think that everybody is happy with a golf course instead of 110 homes. I think you could make an argument that if the money was there, it would be better if there was nothing going on the property, but then there would be people who would say, well, should be some kind of public amenity.
Right,
You know?
right.
I mean, there are hiking trails and stuff like that. I mean, you know, development is a complex process.
Now, when and how did you make the decision to make this crazy modernist clubhouse on the property?
Well, I think that what happened was that once I built the golf course and realized what I had, it gave me license to be a little more adventurous, be more adventurous with the zeitgeist of the club. How about we put it that way? Because my original intention was to build a kind of an Edwardian style building that would be somehow in line with the national golf links in Shinnecock, which is a shingle style Stanford White building. And in fact, I went so far as to systematically acquire Long Island landscape paintings by well-known artists of the area, because there was William Merritt Chase had a plein air studio, teaching studio there. So there's a lot of very interesting Long Island topographic paintings. And I had 10 or 12 that I bought and imagined them decorating the clubhouse. And then as I got into it, I realized that you know, it would be more fun to do something a little more contemporary, which was also more accurately reflective of the vibe of the club. I did it because I could. If I had built a subpar golf course, I would have had to do, you know, what they call Scotland in a can, right? You know,
Right.
It has to be all this fake stuff that mimics, you know, new old or old new or whatever. So people freaked out when they saw the renderings of the clubhouse with all the glass. And I said, believe me, they don't really want to look through the glass at your naked body in the
shower.
locker room.
Yeah,
They're going to
yeah.
be looking at the beautiful views here. Just relax. And it did change the demographic of the club because it attracted a younger, hipper, family-oriented kind of.
And what year was this?
Clubhouse opened, I think, in 07 or 08.
Okay.
And the course had opened 5 years earlier.
And out of all the architects that were available to you, what led you to Roger Ferris?
I met Roger Ferris because one of my partners had picked him to design our trading room in our company. And I met Roger there, and Roger was also a car racer. So he got it, and then he did a loft for my family downtown, which we unfortunately lived in for like a couple days because it was right next to the World Trade Center, and We had just had a baby, and after that, we said we can't stay here, so we moved here instead. And he was a friend, and I was trying to strike a balance between an architect who understood the idiosyncrasies of my vision, but also an architect who could deliver a $20 million plus project vaguely on time and on budget. We'd had experience building bigger projects. So I had been burned with architects who were visionary but not very executory. For example, I had collaborated with a very interesting architect, Evan Douglas, who was at Columbia, and we did this exhibition of Jean Prouvé, and it involved doing rapid prototyping in the spirit of Jean Prouvé of certain elements. And, we were on a schedule to have an exhibition in the exhibition hall at a particular time. And the guys who were doing this rapid prototyping got this very lucrative offer from Disney to make some movie sets or something, and they disappeared. And I like to joke that this was the world's slowest rapid prototype, right? Because it took months and months, and we had to delay the show. And, I learned the hard way that there's vision and then there's execution. So I thought Roger was a good balance between the two. And I think I got a lot of architecture for the money, as well as a building that works and is still pretty shipshape.
I could only find one other modernist golf course building in the world, and that was the King Kamehameha Club.
That's a beautiful building. There's in Arkansas, there's a couple of modernist clubhouses. There may be more than one in Arkansas, but the Tyson Chicken family built a golf club that has a somewhat modern clubhouse. I think if you Google modern golf course clubhouses, there's a bunch of beautiful ones in Korea and Japan. But in America, not so much.
Not so much.
There's one here in New York where you can see the Statue of Liberty from Liberty National, it's called.
Okay.
But that's one that I think is kind of knocked off my clubhouse.
Yeah.
But Michael Jordan's clubhouse kind of looks like my clubhouse.
Oh, really?
Grove 23.
Okay.
I mean, not to be too catty about it, but
Hey, he's from our state.
Well, that's a different sort of a vibe. They have like drones bringing you your food on the golf course, and
Really?
when you play, you can tell the guys what brand of practice balls you want. It's a little over the top. But some people like that. So.
Well, your club is a little over the top. I read that it's one of the most expensive clubs in the world.
It's expensive, but it's not over the top. There's a big difference.
Okay.
There's a big difference. It's expensive because the underlying real estate is expensive.
Yeah.
And, it's very expensive to maintain a golf course there. But I don't think it's over the top. There's no valet parking.
No drones.
No drones. The staff is instructed to be helpful but invisible and low key, and it's very kid friendly. We have wonderful youth programs that I'm very proud of, and
the art is amazing.
Yes, you could say the art maybe is a little over the top.
Yeah, you could say that.
But it's
Bob.
not really over the top. It's interesting.
I mean, could you say it's one of the finest golf club collections ever? Pretty much.
Because there aren't a lot of them, so it's kind of a low bar. Right? But what I particularly like is that several of the artists are actually members of the club. Richard Prince and Rashid Johnson both have art at the course, and then Tom Sachs has a number of pieces there. He's not a golfer. He told me he plays shoe golf, but that doesn't really count. And a number of the artists are either golfers or friends of mine. So it's a very personal collection. I mean, there's two kinds of collections in the world, since we're on the subject of collections.
Yeah.
You could go into Paul Allen's house, okay? Paul Allen, who sold his art collection for $1.2 billion or whatever the number is. And with all due respect to Paul Allen, who was clearly a visionary businessman, that was a trophy checklist collection that resembles a portfolio as much as it resembles the person who assembled it, right?
Yeah.
To me, a real collection is when you go into that person's house and you look at the stuff And you know the person better than before you looked at the stuff, right? It's an extension of the collector. This stuff helps explain
Their personality.
what I am, who I
Yeah.
like, what I like, stuff like that. So, the collections that interest me are the more personal and idiosyncratic collections. I mean, a Richard Prince collection, an art advisor is going to tell you, you should have a cowboy, you should have a nurse, you should have a joke painting, and then you're good, right? And I'm like, okay, that's the greatest hits album. What about all the rest, right? That's kind of the way I look at this stuff.
Well, it's a much more thoughtful way of collecting. It's more curating in its purest sense as opposed to a investment portfolio model that someone's
Yeah, I mean,
advising
like I
on.
was saying before, if I ever buy something as an investment, it usually doesn't work out. It's only when I buy things out of love that they work out as investments.
You've done some very loving things with the course. You've developed this, is it a school in
Foundation.
Harlem?
It's a foundation based in Harlem, but it also has this wonderful living complex that Roger Ferris designed, which consists of 16 shipping containers put together as 8 double wides that the young men live in, and then there's a gathering shed. It's a very interesting example of container
Yeah.
architecture. And the young men live there in the summer, and they work at the club, they caddy, they work at the golf operation, they work on their college essays, and they have a critical thinking workshop, and they play a lot of golf and tennis and go to the beach and whatever. And it's like a halfway house between high school and college, because most of these kids never really are away from home where they have to look after themselves. So they're doing their laundry and cooking and cleaning up after themselves and following a work schedule. And it's a very meaningful project for my wife and me to run this now. So.
And they're making, great connections too.
Yeah, the members have really embraced it, and a lot of them are providing internships and employment opportunities, and it's been very gratifying because it wasn't obvious that this would be something that they would embrace.
But it's working, and it's been working for a number of years.
Listen, America's a tough place. I mean, our public education system is disintegrating.
Yeah.
It's being starved of oxygen, and some days I wake up and I say, you can't really fix educational inequality until you fix income inequality, but I can't fix income inequality. I can only provide a leg up to some dozens or cumulatively hundreds of young men over the course of some number of years and give them the attention and the resources that our children had, It gives you perspective because, when you run a high-end golf club, you're kind of in a certain bubble,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So this keeps my feet on the ground.
Golf courses, supposedly, I've read, benefited from the pandemic in a way because it was a way for people to do something.
Yes, in fact, golf courses are one of the winners from COVID, and we'll see if that's sustained. But what it has done is it has rescued a lot of marginal municipal courses from oblivion and has allowed for some of those courses to be renovated and opened up to the community. I'm thinking of a particular project in Philadelphia whose name escapes me at the moment, but it does help the notion, if the golf industry is healthy, they are more likely to be open to notions of inclusion. And of course, golf has also changed with the arrival of Topgolf and with the whole alt golf complex, which I'm fine with because we teach our young men to play golf on simulators in the wintertime, and then they get on the course in the spring. It's like a VR video game, right?
Right.
And it works.
At what point did you decide to start exploring the idea of houses around the golf course? Because initially that was rejected when you were going through all the early stages.
The initial proposal was for 2 golf courses and 40 houses. And one of the golf courses was going to be public and one was going to be private. And as we got into it, it evolved to 1 golf course and 70 houses. And then I said, well, what if we make it a private golf course and I'll do 20 houses, because I thought that was the most economically viable project for me. I didn't really want to run a daily fee public golf course.
Right.
I mean, I didn't even play golf at the time, but I figured at least with a private course, you sell out the membership and you're done.
Yeah.
Right. And at the time, a very wise person told me to put the 20 lots on the best part of the property. He said, golf courses are very speculative. If the golf course doesn't work out, you still have these 20 lots and you get your money back.
Yeah.
Then, the project was going well enough that I said, well, since I don't need to develop these lots, why don't I just wait till the golf club is full? Golf club was full in like 2015, but the real estate market in the Hamptons, for some reason that I still don't understand, was dead. I don't know why. The stock market was going up. There was disposable income, but people weren't buying. Then COVID hit.
Everybody was buying.
Everybody was buying. So I said, okay, now's the time. So I'm actually in the process of building my first spec house there. I built a very small house there not quite 10 years ago, just like 2,200 square feet. My idea was that people would want something that was like one step up from a bungalow at the Chateau Marmont.
Okay.
But people in the Hamptons want more. So this time I'm building something that's, 6,500 square feet with drop-dead views and everything.
And is Roger doing those?
Yes, Roger is doing those. It's really a brand extension exercise. It's so clear what you get when you live at the bridge now that it should be pretty easy to, you don't have to leave much to the buyer's imagination. Normally with a spec house, there's like just renderings, but here there's a spec house in the middle of a golf course that's been there for 20 years with a clubhouse that's been there for 15 years by the same architect, and the club is full of happy members with a long waiting list. So it's an easier sell. People don't always have the imagination you would like them to have.
Right. Where do you live when you're out there?
We have a small farmhouse closer to the beach.
Okay.
Where our kids grew up. It's nice to have a little distance.
Yeah.
I don't really need to have the biggest house at the bridge. I'm fine where I am.
Yeah. And so there'll be 10, 20 houses?
Well, there's 20 lots, and some of the lots have been bought by people who aren't in any hurry to build. I'm probably going to build 3 or 4 more in the short run, see how that feels. I'm not in any hurry.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to see it built out in my lifetime, but I figure I got another 20 years left. Right?
Sure. Well, all the articles I read about you herald you as being in great shape. So...
That's right. In fact, right after this, I'm going to my Pilates session.
There you go.
So,
do you get confused with the other Robert Rubin?
All the time.
Tell me about that, because I was researching you, he's the guy I came across initially.
It's worse than that. When I worked for a company called J. Aaron, which was acquired by Goldman Sachs when he was ascending to the co-head position of Goldman Sachs, and I left in part because life was too short to be known as the other Bob Rubin, to be like little Bob, right? And then he went on to become,
advisor to the president.
Titan of Wall Street.
Yeah.
He's quite a bit older than me. He's in his mid-80s now. But it's very funny. I went to an art world dinner the other night, and I sat next to the person who co-wrote his autobiography with him. And I said, that's very funny because, you and I have something in common.
Yeah.
I get mail addressed Dear Bob and Judith. His wife is named Judith.
Okay.
And we have a number of friends in common. But sometimes I get a good table at a restaurant and it's because they thought I was him. But I adopted I use my middle name a lot.
Okay. Melvin.
Melvin, yes. And in fact, I'm just about to launch a website, robertmelvinrubin.com, so that I can archive all my writings and exhibition images and stuff like that. And I try to use that because I think he's Robert E. Rubin, if I remember correctly. Listen, it could be worse. Teddy Cruz, my architect friend.
Yeah.
Imagine what life is like for, and I sometimes say, I have this friend in California, Ted Cruz, and people look at me like I have 2 heads. But he calls himself Teddy, so that helps.
That helps.
I'd much rather be the other Bob Rubin than the other Ted Cruz.
Last question. In one of the presentations you gave recently, I think it was at AIA New York, you were talking about how many modernist houses and buildings have been photographed in a way such that maybe just 2 or 3 images is what you see everywhere.
Right.
In fact, during this presentation, you showed some of the Maison de Verre that had been photoshopped a little bit
Right.
by whoever did it.
Right.
So that kind of implied that we needed more images to be able to really more fully understand
Right.
these buildings, right?
Yeah, and I think that it's a very interesting subject and it's very timely, and I'm going to give you a long-winded answer to that. First of all, it's true that architects, in the absence of being able to visit a building, you know a building from pictures of the building. Right now, in another 10 years, that'll be academic because we'll be able to take VR tours of buildings in a way that you'll get 80 or 90%
Experience,
of the real thing. Although I'm presently working with a very interesting student at Cooper Union who's making models that are focused on trying to convey the architectural experience rather than literally represent the building, if you see what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But the Maison de Verre is a very interesting example for two reasons. Number one, the glass facade, which has that metal crossbanding on it, didn't look like that when Chareau built it. And originally, it had a very different looking glass brick and no crossbanding. The crossbanding makes it look Japanese. The original facade was meant to be much more dematerialized and to essentially be a continuation of the courtyard cobblestones coming up the facade. So that's point number one. Point number two, it's clear that back then, the people who were documenting the building, who were presumably close to Chareau, they weren't comfortable with the idea that the building was coexisting with the early 19th century mansard upstairs. They don't want people to see that, even though it's a much more modern idea to say, yes, this was an insertion in an existing fabric, and the building lives very comfortably in these surroundings. It's not the modernist conceit of tabula rasa, and we got to tear it all down and make it all anew. There's no such thing as new. It's, everything is accretive, right? So the Maison de Verre is this kind of accretive insertion into this fabric, which was already 200 or 300 years in the making. So there are very few pictures of the Maison de Verre with the 19th century mansard roof. There's lots of pictures the way it is now with the mid-century anodyne or generic modernist change that was made in the 50s to the upstairs apartment and the new facade. And everybody thinks of the Maison de Verre as this sort of Japanized cross-hatching thing. So we're in the process of changing that as we speak. The scaffolding arrived this morning and they're putting it up as we speak. We fabricated the new bricks, which are identical to the old bricks, which are very different from the replacement bricks. The replacement bricks, so what happened was the facade caved in.
Yeah.
And the beautiful artisanal bricks that Saint-Gobain made in the 1930s, they weren't making anymore. So the family got the only bricks they could, which are these industrial mass-produced bricks, which transmit the light completely differently, much more harshly. And it's a very different look and feel in the Grand Salon of the house. So we went to Portugal and we found these guys. We got the original formula from Saint-Gobain. We experimented with some other ways of dealing with the fact that, there was like arsenic and stuff in the original formula. So we modified it. We made 3 or 4 batches till we got it right. And now we're replacing the facade. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the world reacts when they see pictures of the new facade. They're going to be, well, that's not the Maison de Verre.
Yeah, yeah.
But it is the Maison de Verre.
Absolutely.
We're going back. I mean, architecture is hard to convey. You can have a retrospective of Picasso or de Kooning, and although the insurance will, break the museum, you can assemble the greatest hits and have a wonderful monographic exhibition. If you're trying to present or represent architecture, it's much harder. Although, as I said, as digital technology progresses, we'll get to the point where that gap will be bridged more. I think that we are doing the correct thing because, obviously the Historic Monument Commission in France, which has a lot more teeth than ours has, they're like on top of us and they're our partner in the project. And
But they must really love you because you are being very thoughtful about this and very intricate and intimate.
So far, our relationship with them has been very good.
Yeah.
And they're very, yes, it's true. We are doing.
It's not like you're coming in with Home Depot as a sponsor and throwing up stuff.
No, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. They have a lot of applications from impecunious chateau owners who want to do degrading things to these 18th century monuments, and we're not in that category. But still, they have a job to do, and they're doing it.
Yeah. As you look ahead, is there a succession plan? Is there a group that is going to take over any pieces of these things and carry them on for the next 60 years?
Which things?
The Maison de Verre or the golf course?
The Maison de Verre, we've had it for 17 years.
Yeah.
And we're planning to enjoy it until we go. Our objective in our lifetime is to make the house secure for the 21st century. That when we acquired the house, it was visitable but not really habitable, and nothing major had been done to it since it was built. They took very good care of it, but it was not occupied for several decades, and things are deteriorating, and we rewired the house and replumbed the house and re-roofed the part of the house that has a roof, and we're in the process of remaking the garden side balcony, which is 25 tons of cement. And we're doing a lot of very heavy lifting that I feel like I have the background and the confidence and the means for, so that whatever happens to the house, the fact that it will be ship-shape by the time we're done, and that it is also classified in its totality by the French authorities, meaning that, you can't turn it into a hotel or anything like that. Whatever happens to it, the house will be safe. That's our main objective, that the house becomes permanent so that it's not like hanging by a thread the way Villa Cavrois was before the French government came in, or E1027, or the other success stories of public acquisition of an important house. As far as the bridge is concerned, I think that the club will be sold to the members. I'm sure the members will want to keep it as close to the way it is as possible. And if they don't, it's okay, because I won't be around. They can do whatever they want to it. I think that the Tropical House is in good hands at the Pompidou. The Fly's Eye Dome is in good hands at Crystal Bridges.
Yes. I talked with Dylan Turk recently.
Is he still there? That's great. Yeah. That's great. The Maison de Verre is still in good hands, and it's getting better every day. So those are the things I worry about. I don't worry so much about the bridge.
Well, talking with the other Bob Rubin, this has been great. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
George was just talking with Robert Melvin Rubin in New York.
It wasn't until she was 35 that vocalist and band leader Libby York started her music career. She performed with Swing Street, an 8-piece big band in the 1980s, and since then she has released 5 albums and performed around the world. Her latest, Dreamland, was recorded with Randy Napoleon, Rodney Whitaker, and Keith Hall, and is out now. And you can catch performances in Key West, Chicago, New York, and Paris. Welcome, Libby.
Hi, how are you doing?
I am doing well. I want to know, before we talk about music, tell me about your restaurant, the Back Porch Cafe in Delaware, which was farm to table back in the 70s, decades before that was really a thing.
Oh, wow.
Right. We opened right around when Alice Waters opened Chez Panisse in Berkeley. And we were definitely doing farm to table. The farmers would directly deliver their fresh food, and we did fresh seafood. And we were kind of the first ones at the shore in Delaware. It's a beautiful ocean resort that, has something other than boardwalk French fries and hot dogs. So, and it was a hit immediately. And lo and behold, it's been there all these years, like 46 or 7 years. I haven't owned it for a long time, but it's wonderful to go back now and see that it's so well loved in the area there.
The Back Porch Cafe, huh?
Right. You could go to backporchcafe.com, and I think my picture is still on there all these years later. But I love the creative part of opening a restaurant, but then the day-to-day drone of keeping it going, it's hard. I was already taking the bus to New York to be a jazz singer after about 5 years.
Yeah, what got you into performing and out of the kitchen? Was it that grind of the daily chores?
Yeah, I always loved music, but it didn't occur to me to try to make a career out of it. I sat in with a great guitarist. Actually, I'm in Key West today, and sat in with a New York guitarist here in Key West, and he said, if you're ever in New York, come sit in with me on my gig. Well, that's all I had to hear. I had a summer sublet on the Upper West Side, and I ended up moving to New York for about 15 years, so that got me going.
And in the early years, you had some incredible run-ins. You worked at Saturday Night Live in New York.
Yep.
You even sang for Tennessee Williams in Key West.
Right. The Saturday Night Live gig was through a mutual friend, and they hired me as a PA, a production assistant. And my first job, they gave me the keys to a big van, and I had to pick up the talent, quote unquote, for a shoot in Central Park. Well, little did I tell them I had never driven in New York City before, but I got the keys and picked everybody up and got them there and back safely. And that was in the years when Eddie Murphy was on the show and Joe Piscopo, it was early 80s.
Right.
And then what was the other job you mentioned?
Tennessee Williams in Key West.
Oh, yeah. Our friend Antonia, who had a beautiful restaurant, was from Italy, and she had befriended Leonard Bernstein at the opera in Rome, and he hung out here in Key West a bit in those days. And we got a call, hey, Lenny's here for dinner. Do you want to come over? So, of course, I went over, and he knew I was a singer, and after dinner we were drinking grappa, as I recall.
Oh,
and
serious.
He said, Libby, let's go to the piano and play some blues. And I remember I sang Billie Holiday's Fine and Mellow with Lenny at the piano.
Oh, my goodness.
It wasn't until afterward I thought, oh, my gosh, I just sang the blues with Leonard Bernstein. It's pretty remarkable.
That's a phrase you don't hear too often.
No, not often. But I still remember his face. I was standing, he was sitting at the piano, and his face looking up, it was like Yoda or something, this master genius. It really made me realize what a master he was. And I had grown up watching his young people's concerts on TV. And yeah, Key West is the kind of place you might meet people like that where you'd never would in some other life.
Well, let's listen to some of your music. Sunday in New York was a 1963 romantic comedy starring Jane Fonda as she wildly obsesses over losing her virginity, as Robert Culp, Rod Taylor, and Cliff Robertson make their moves. Based on the 1961 play by Norman Krasna, the title song was composed and recorded by Peter Nero and sung by Mel Torme. Later on, it was a huge hit for Bobby Darin. Here's Libby with Sunday in New York, accompanied by Renee Rosnes on piano, Todd Kuhlman on bass, Billy Drummond on drums, and Frank West on tenor sax.
New York on Sunday, a big city taking a nap. Slow down, it's Sunday, life's a ball, let it fall right in your lap. If you've got troubles, just take 'em out for a walk. They'll burst like bubbles in the fun of a Sunday in New York. You can spend time without spending a dime, watching people watch people pass. Later you pause, and in one of the stores there's that face next to yours in the glass. Two hearts start beating, you're much too breathless to speak. Love smiles her greeting, and the dream that has seen you through the week comes true on Sunday in New York. can spend time without spending a dime watching people watch people pass. Later you pause, and in one of the stores there's that face next to yours in the glass. Two hearts start beating. You're much too breathless to speak. Love smiles her greeting, and the dream that has seen you through the week comes true on Sunday, comes true on Sunday, comes true on Sunday in New York.
That is fabulous. Thank you, Libby. What a great song.
Yes, it is. And actually, the lyrics were written by the wonderful Carol Coates, who also wrote London by Night. And I was fortunate to get to meet Carol. I got an email in New York. The subject was Thursday in Carmel. And I opened it, and it was Carol at his home in Carmel saying how he had heard that cut on the radio out there and liked it. And we became kind of pen pals. And when I was out in Carmel, I got to visit him and his wife, sit around the piano and play some music and sing. And he's just a charming, wonderful man. That was really, really fun. The movie is a little corny, but the song is great.
The song is really great. One of my favorite to dance to, by the way. It's a great swing song.
Oh, good. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad to know you're a swing dancer. I love to do that as well.
Dreamland, your latest album, dropped earlier this year and is available everywhere. Tell us about the album.
Well, this was recorded to kind of my post-pandemic effort, very kind of minimalist, with Randy Napoleon on guitar, Rodney Whitaker on the bass, and Keith Hall on the drums on 4 cuts. We recorded up in Michigan. Rodney is head of the jazz department at Michigan State, and he asked me to come up and teach a master class, and I told him, well, I can't teach these kids anything about theory. He said, no, they don't need to know that. They've got that. They need to know something about what a life in music is like. And I thought, okay, I have a few decades of experience with that. And we went up and recorded it. It was post-pandemic, kind of September of 21. So it's really exciting to have it out now. And lately I feel like I like taking things out rather than putting things in. So it's kind of soft and minimalist, and I hope people enjoy it.
This next song was written by Peggy Lee and Bill Schluger and released by Capitol Records in 1961, became a huge hit, even getting Peggy on The Ed Sullivan Show. In case you've forgotten, Ed Sullivan was a TV variety show host. His New York studios were later used by David Letterman and Stephen Colbert. This song's been covered by Ella Fitzgerald, Buddy Greco, Bette Midler, and, in a duet with Peggy Lee, Judy Garland. Even the HBO series 6 Feet Under featured it in 3 episodes. Here's Libby with I Love Being Here With You.
I love the East, I love the West, and North and South, they're both the best. But I would only go there as a guest, 'cause I love being here with you. I love the sea, I love the shore, I love the rocks, and what is more, with you there they'd never be a bore. I love being here with you. I'm singing in the shower, laughing by the hour. Life is such a breezy game. Through all kinds of weather, long as we're together, I love to hear you say my name. I like good wine, fine cuisine, candlelight. I really dig this scene. Baby, you know what I mean. I love being here with you. I love the East, yeah, I love the West. North and South, they are both the best. I would only go there as a guest. I love being here with you. I love the sea, I even love the shore. I love the rocks, and what is more, with you there they'd never be a bore. I love being here with you. You should hear me singing in the shower, laughing by the hour. Life is such a breezy game. Through all kinds of weather, long as we're together, I love to hear you say my name. I like good wine, fine cuisine, candlelight, dig the scene. Baby, you know what I mean. I love being here with you. Shower, laughing by the hour. Life is such a breezy game. Through all kinds of weather, long as we're together, love to hear you say my name. I like good wine and fine cuisine, candlelight, I really dig this scene. Baby, you know what I mean. I love being here with you. Love being here with you. I love being here with you.
You know, I feel somehow the urge to be in a tux sipping a martini right about now.
That's great. Sounds good to me.
You certainly have a knack for picking great side men and women. That's a fantastically instrumentated track.
Yeah, just listening to Warren Vacher, we've worked together many times, and he's on 2 of my CDs, and so much fun. We played up at the Jazz Forum in New York for last Valentine's Day, which was really fun. And and that's Howard Alden on guitar, and that record Here With You features Russell Malone as well. So, yeah, I've been lucky to work with some of the best around, you know.
The website is LibbyYork.com, and her latest album is Dreamland. Thanks for joining us, Libby.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 15,000 significant modernist houses, and access 4.1 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Kelly Policelli did guest research. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back in Palm Springs next week with another exciting episode recorded poolside at the U.S. Modernist Compound during Modernism Week.